Hello, my friends. Just back to continue on with some of the information regarding the Kingdom of Manna and the Trust and some of these final stages and steps that we're getting through, of which we'll then be able to continue to keep re-educating everybody as to some of the missing parts of their historic, lineage through all their families and have led them to where we are and this massive change that is unfolding before our eyes, that is essentially going to be the largest, one of the most sweeping, massive changes for humanity in our history. Might not be seen currently, but it is unmistakably happening behind the scenes and more in front of the scenes, as you will discover. Essentially, though, we are born sovereign monarchs, but we have forgotten much. It has been through great deception and coercion, packaged in various ways as implied consent, colour of law, and other manipulations of language, that the Earth's slave masters, who were woven through the systems of the old global trusts management teams, had stolen the identities and natural sovereignty of all the planet's inhabitants and its resources, using them as tools for building great personal wealth, while keeping everything controlled, hidden in plain sight, but deliberately lost in a sea of admiralty and maritime confusion. Caught in a web of deceit that has entrapped humanity for more and more deeply each and every generation. Well, anyway, that time has come to an end. The Kingdom of Manna is officially the world's newest country, and its government administration and royal monarch are working around the clock to bring freedom and prosperity to every nation, family, and person on the planet. The task of the Kingdom of Manna is to bring balance, peace, prosperity, harmony, and security to all of the people on the planet. Kingdom of Manna offers an intricate yet simple remedy and liberation process to return sovereignty to all humans and dismantle and or repurpose these old slavery structures for everybody. The process is not to establish sovereignty, but rather to return to the very thing. For as much as we may call ourselves sovereign and claim we never consented to slavery, those of the old system that we inadvertently sign our rights to will continue to claim, continue to act and enforce otherwise unless they're provided with a lawful and practical platform that builds new possibilities, new ways forward, while exposing and dismantling the old fraud for all to witness and experience. One of the priority directives of Kingdom of Manna is to fulfill the completion of the original treaties that were signed many thousands of years ago, including the fair and equitable redistribution of the global wealth that originally backed the global systems, including a return of this accumulated wealth to the original tribes who were the asset holders and lenders for this system, as was stipulated in the original treaty, while simultaneously creating secure local communities and global protective structures with the same countries and unifying their sovereign citizens as one. Most of the information peddlers surrounding this global wealth, commonly known as the global collateral accounts, have been misled and or are missing critical information. They were consequently uninformed, misinformed, and or self-serving groups still tied in some way, shape or form to the old management. And the old management sits many tiers above the central banking system, which is historically owned, as we know, by the Rothschild family. I'll say that again, the Rothschild family. And the corporatized puppet governments of the world. If you have not realised or directly witnessed how life's essential elements have been weaponised against the people, then you, my friend, are either asleep or in denial. Nature, food production, healthcare, water, banking, the media, and the very air we breathe have been corrupted and poisoned in ways, by the way, that are entirely unacceptable, to fit an agenda of control and bonded slavery concocted by a few. These global systems and institutes that have been responsible for shaping our world were created over many generations, but were not genuinely designed to truly benefit the people of planet Earth. They were created as mechanisms to coerce, manipulate, and minimize and enforce a human potential that has been quite small by comparison to what it might be, while waging wars of obscene criminal destruction against the people of Earth itself. Sometimes these have been done by stealth and often by brute force. The former controllers enslaved, harvested, and destroyed humanity and nature for their own personal gain and sometimes amusement. The very institutions we are told are here to guide and serve us are in reality the eyes and hands of a shadow-controlled structure with zero concern for humanity and often with absolute evil at its core. As much as you wouldn't like to believe that, it is quite often the case, has been. Almost every government on earth was corporatized and serves as a for-profit arm of this control structure. Spirituality was hijacked and turned into various dogmatic religions used as a mechanism for mass mind control, originating at the birth and then christened via fear-based original sinners' doctrines by where one could only be redeemed in the eyes of God by confessing one's sins to the priests and churches. Sadly, the Catholic institution has become a breeding ground for multiple levels of abuses of its power. Education became indoctrination and process for dumbing down the population for the purposes of controlled profiteering once more and personal subversion. Even the world's benevolent secret societies and mystical fraternities were infiltrated, and the original primordial teachings were distorted to fit this controlling agenda. As the old management sought to establish a worldwide control system that would result in complete subjugation and exploitation of the earth and its inhabitants, we have been manipulated, and slowly but surely these histories have been weaned out of our consciousness. As a result, the true capacity of mankind and its growth potential has been stunted and deliberately retarded. And I use that word specifically, not to have anything to do with how one's mental state might be, but in the retardation, the making of smaller, less significant, less understandable, less comprehensible systems. That system was stunted and deliberately retarded. Our apparent freedoms have been removed a little at a time, and our God-given gifts and inalienable rights have been fodder for being regulated, taxed, licensed, and distributed back to us as benefits or privileges. Well, thank you. I think we could do better. The Kingdom of Manna, as it's known, is a sovereign country that holds protectorate authority for the Manna World Holding Trust, and as a result, possesses the same responsibility and authority for the protection of all living things, and breathing things, and swimming things, and walking, running, jumping things on planet Earth. Humanity, being Kingdom of Manna's immediate priority, given that that is the case, at this time the directive of the Trust and the Kingdom of Manna through all means at its disposal is to administer the remedy and relief to all countries. Also to all tribes and people of all communities of the world. After thousands of years of enforcement of propaganda, manipulation, media, mind control, and vast misinformation, mankind and the world we live has been corrupted and polluted beyond all common sense. It seems to be common sense is very limited these days. The Kingdom of Manna itself was formed to serve as a flagship protectorate for the global assets held within the Manna World Holding Trust. The Kingdom of Manna literally serves as the teacher, providing a blueprint for other nations seeking to be free of the corrupted and criminal old management structures that administered sub-agreements in complete opposition to and that are treasonous to the original treaties, which are potentially punishable by death or life imprisonment for crimes against humanity of such a degree. Some of the main activities of the Kingdom of Manna and what they oversee include a return to universal natural law and overseeing the complex processes of sovereignty being administered back to all nations and the protection and repatriation of the global wealth to all peoples as agreed to from the original treaties as they were signed. The Royal Monarch of the Kingdom of Manna, the King Supreme Commander and Grand Master Knight of the Kingdom of Manna, His Majesty Michael Uriel, Gabriel Raphael, Zevikiel of All Saints, or simply put, Michael Uriel I, is the true first sovereign monarch for the millennia, a monarch who is fighting to defend the freedom, liberation, illumination and security of a tired, confused and enslaved planet. We've all known something's been wrong for a long time, my friends. You cannot deny it. Trying to put your finger on it has not been so easy because of the incredible web of deception that has been keeping us from the truth. The Kingdom of Manna is here to bring kindness, harmony, grace, and the missing factual knowledge of the critical aspects of our history. The latest instalment and incarnation of the Kingdom of Manna was officially established in October 2016 and is the first kingdom formed without bloodshed since well before the reign of the Roman Empire. More than 150 of the 209 countries formally contacted by the Kingdom of Manna have already accepted and welcomed this new addition to our planet and are currently being enlightened as to the nature of the resources, services, ongoing support, and gracious generosity that the Kingdom of Manna stands boldly offering back as part of its directive to all nations of the world. The Kingdom of Manna wishes only to give back to the nations of the world what it was tasked with protecting and executing via ancient agreements made many, many dozens of generations ago. A collective decision of a group of people known as the tribes and their descendants who in ancient times signed the original treaty that resulted in the establishment of the Master Trust. And this is now known as the Manna World Holding Trust and is also known as Manna Trust. It is the descendants of the original tribes who are working with the trustee and the Royal Monarch of the Kingdom of Manna to free humanity from the enslavement systems that previously the trustees of the trust and subordinate management groups had been directly and indirectly responsible for establishing. So the trust has not always had good people sitting on top of it. Well, as you can tell by our history. And the past trustees and or old management teams, very deceptive, keeping everybody on a governor and as low on the food chain as possible. Eventually, once the remedy is administered and delivered via the original treaty agreements, the trust is designed to collapse and disappear at the accomplishment of its directive. But not until the nations of the planet have accepted and successfully received and adopted the assistance being offered. This will ensure each country's liberation, peace and prosperity as an autonomous, self-governing, corruption-free and financially independent sovereign nation. Although separate from Manna World Holding Trust, which is sovereign unto itself, Kingdom of Manna is able to perform its protective functions, as it is currently the only other entity on Earth with sovereignty of a royal monarch status. Even Queen Elizabeth II does not possess and is not entitled to perform the duties of royal full sovereign at this time. Those who had previously been issued or claimed themselves sovereign and who became Earth's ultimate slave masters have had their sovereignty revoked by the current trustee of the Manna World Holding Trust. It was the Trust's old management teams who are responsible for the planetary destruction and exploitation that had occurred for millennia, which has exponentially worsened, mind you, over the last 500 years with the advent of the Rothschilds banking dynasty. Rather than managing the assets of the Trust on behalf of and for the betterment of a better Earth and humanity, the old management teams went rogue and weaponized the financial and government systems to wage war on Earth and its people. A war that has been raging globally under martial law for thousands of years. As one of the responsibilities the Manna World Holding Trust is tasked with is to act as guardian and safekeepers of what are commonly known as, we are aware, of the global collateral accounts. These accounts do indeed exist in the thousands and were the original assets and collateral brought together and created by the tribes back in the times of empires and kingdoms. Quite ironic, no, given the nature of what the tribes have been trying to receive recognition for and their legitimacy. But even sovereignty to the tribes is something that needs to be re-understood as to how that all stands in the current system and what Manna World Holding Trust and the Kingdom of Manna has been tasked with. The old accounts were essentially the old spoils of war and conquests over many generations and have gone by various names over the centuries. Hundreds of individuals and subordinate family groups had historically claimed or received control over some of them, both legitimately and illegitimately. Due largely in part to the Nicene Council and Emperor Constantine I and his efforts, the Vatican had been granted management status for the trust by mid-300 AD. And given from that time on, all roads pretty much have led to Rome, as the saying goes. There was a long lineage of Roman Church, Vatican agendas to indeed control everything and everyone on the planet, which we can look back and see. The Rothschilds bankers, who oversaw the global central banking phenomenon for the last 500 years, were affiliated with a number of the subordinate families and groups from Asia and Europe that many of us have heard of. For some years now, all of these groups, regardless of the previous status or authority, have had their access to the accounts revoked, starting in 2007, when the Rothschilds and Vatican both received their notice from Manna World Holding Trust of the revocation of their authority over any of these accounts, which was actually the mechanism which triggered the global financial crisis of 2008, not some of the other manufactured stories, subprime markets and everything else. Although, of course, that is all illegitimate and illegal structures, unlawful practices of finance and funding and mortgages as it is. Just one more the things that need to be pulled back into alignment with the banks. There needs to be a complete re-education of all banks and their workers and their executive in order to make sure that this kind of behaviour, as we're discovering here in Australia and elsewhere, so it doesn't continue, because all they're going to scratch on here in Australia is the very surface of a much, much deeper issue. Far greater. They really saw how much money was being pilfered. People would be out in the streets with pitchforks. By 2015, the Manna World Holding Trust and its teams had officially delivered notifications to the previously sovereign and sub-sovereign entities such as the United Nations, IMF, World Bank and Vatican, informing them of this sovereignty and account access revocation. All of these former sovereign and sub-sovereign control structures created by the old management teams had been used as part of a weaponizing of the financial system and manipulating and controlling all corresponding systems of government, education, welfare, healthcare, and local and international corporate business and military. At the direction of Manna World Holding Trust and the agreements and directives of the original treaties, the Kingdom of Manna, its Royal Monarch, Michael Luril, and its global team of conscious professionals are working to effectively and efficiently distribute the wealth back to humanity along with a blueprint of many potential ideas and structures that enhance life on Earth and that support the prosperity, liberation, and evolution of humankind. Humanity will be free to create a new civilization of peace on Earth with intelligent protective mechanisms and processes in place, assuring in perpetuity that the weaponizing of our banks, governments, and systems can never occur again. But first we have to learn as to what it has been perpetrated against us in order to be able to make sure that that doesn't happen again, correct? If we simply don't know what we don't know, we'll continue to keep repeating the same issues. The Kingdom of Manna seeks to return not only the wealth of the trust back to the people, but also return true divine sovereignty under natural and universal and common law. Along with distributing the global wealth, the natural processes of returning to sovereignty and accepting full independence is being offered to all of the nations, tribes and monarchies. From that newly regained status, individual countries, tribes and monarchies will provide the assurance to clean up the corruption and broken systems from within their communities and countries, and then begin a process for establishing individual sovereignty for each person within their country to become living, free men and women in alignment with their divine purpose. How different that'll be to the current situation. Under the laws of sovereignty, any country who wages war immediately forfeits their own sovereign status. A sovereign country may only defend itself from attack, just as with a sovereign individual. When all of the world's countries are once again sovereign, independent and financially autonomous, there will be no longer be the levels of today's crime, poverty and war that we see. Particularly is that if we have the media, who are so complicit in all of the issues that we're dealing with today, pull their head out of their rectum and actually start reporting on things other than what they are told from their executive to report. You've got Lisa Wilkinsons and Carl and his brother and all of these people here in Australia, among all other reporters and in media outlets across the planet, simply reporting on what they're told to, unless they come up with some little, novel story to go and publish for some special Sunday night 60 Minutes or something, like super flus and the consequent vaccination that's available to get rid of it. I mean, come on. What on earth is just insane. Anyway, come on, Mr. Stefanovic and your brother. Come on, all of the media. Let's start getting back on a track of some real journalism, some investigation and some real thorough fact-checking. Not just taking what you're being told and fed from above you, because that's been one of the biggest problems we've been dealing with, in particular the last 30 to 50 years. But it goes back far further. Anyway, the immense depth and scale of the control structures being dismantled and re-educated is almost unfathomable to everybody. And most who consider themselves amongst the elite have no idea of the extent of this either. Names such as the Rothschilds, institutions including the Vatican, the Crown and the governments of the world's nations occupy the 1% of this complex hierarchy. And many of them do not even understand the nature of some of the dismantling that is going on. But they are being re-educated and shown the facts and the information and the original treaties. The bulk of the control structure has until now been kept well and truly hidden. It's the master trust that sits at the top of the planetary control structure. Manna World Holding Trust, Manna Trust, was specifically created for this purpose. It has for thousands of years operated as the primary sovereign, the private sovereign entity under which all others were sub-sovereign and beholden to or report to. Should be doing the right thing. That's where we're heading, is report back in a positive manner. The trust was used as a mechanism of control for all systems and as a means to fund the creation of a global corporate institutions of elite globalist agendas while extensively harvesting the Earth's resources and its people. That's the opposite use. Governments worldwide have been and are continuing to receive documents and are in discussions with the Kingdom of Manna. Many officials and their legal representatives are unaware of the historically embedded control structures and are being provided evidence and facts as to that agenda and how to detach their nations and peoples from their debt enslavement and once again become sovereign, financially independent and governmentally autonomous. Not just puppets. All groups and governments within these former control structures are being given the choice to serve humanity in this transition or potentially suffer the legal consequences for such prolonged crimes against humanity. Ignorance will not be considered as a case in many of these instances. Although in most cases, and unbeknownst to most government and law officials, not all, that within their own system they have been complicit and committed treasonous acts against the people of Earth. Often in complete ignorance, if you can believe it. But I'd say majority of those working within government systems, are unaware of the true complicit nature of what they have been a party to. But eventual disclosure will prove that that's no longer a case for exemption. The governments are not the enemy, although they appear so. There are literally many controlling layers that have existed above the governments of the world, and at this time the head of the snake has been removed. Or you could say there was multiple heads of the snake. And as with the removal of the head of the snake has been a slow and methodical removal of the snake's layers of vertebrae. With the lawful and legal Manna trustee revoking all access to the accounts, these groups no longer have any funds to keep digging themselves out of their prolonged millennia of global mismanagement. And consequently, the lower level controllers have broken into factions and are fighting amongst themselves like crazy at the moment to stay alive. As without the head of the snake, the body's running around trying to work out how to re-engage and how to proceed with the agenda that they are so heavily indoctrinated into. They don't know what to do at the moment. They haven't got a chief, they haven't got a head. There's a lot of lower level chiefs running around at the moment trying to work out how to recouple the wagon to the horse, so to speak. Along with eventual transparency and public disclosure of the Kingdom of Manna and its liberation structures, intentions and knowledge-based economy, the Kingdom of Manna has offered and will continue to offer the following to governments and tribes of the people of Earth. Now, there's a lot here to read, but I will just share the fact that firstly, there'll be a new transparent financial system. My goodness. That is almost unfathomable, isn't it? But that needs to be the case straight away because of the criminal practices that have been operating for so long, so many generations. People just think it's normal. At this time, the entire banking infrastructure on the planet is insolvent. The new banking systems will also be real-time settlement systems, no more holding and trading of public's money without their benefit. Funds will move from account to account in real time, without the bank holding the funds of anyone for any purpose. Wow. Just that simple thing right there. We will bring the new advanced technologies, nanotechnologies, revolutionary medical energy computing systems, along with natural non-polluting propulsion systems that have been ready for release for some time. Many have been historically suppressed or blocked from funding. Some have been previously bought from patent holders and then buried. And much of this technology has been hidden for anywhere between 30 to 100 plus years and would have us far down the road in our own advancement. Also, the new education academies. The Brain Trust of forward-thinking teachers and educators are collaborating currently with the Kingdom of Manna to redefine what it means to be educated, intelligent, creative and scholarly in different countries and cultures worldwide. Because although there are similarities, there are differences. And we need to work on new models of championing the genius within children from the very beginning. As Sir Ken Robinson puts it, not trying to squeeze all of these children, I don't know if this is exactly what he said, into a box by where you take all your square, round, oblong, rectangle children and try to squeeze them into one uniform shape of a gender and education. Simply doesn't work. And we actually end up dumbing down these children from the very beginning and not championing their genius. New models of the education and curriculum are being brought up to speed to meet the coming great changes to life on Earth. Because once you get a whole series of new information brought to you, it changes everything, including when you have the historic threads to what it is you've actually been living through for the last 5 to 16,000 years, as opposed to what you've been told. It changes everything. Religion, government, finances, healthcare, you name it. Just the ways in which we deal with each other is there'd be a whole deeper knowing. Then the wondering of who we are and what we're doing here disappears. Start to remember the nature of who we are and what we're doing here. The Kingdom of Manna is also involved with several uniquely wonderful partnerships and global initiatives with natural medicines and indigenous medicine schools that will be operating side by side with the next generation of high-tech medical schools. There's many other things here to read, but it is about an evolved and evolutionary and conscious planning of how to move forward with everybody, without anybody missing out in any way, shape or form. What the Kingdom of Manna is here to provide is care for everybody that needs it, bar none. If you need assistance, you need help, you need care, there isn't anybody that should be left behind. It's a new way forward, comprehend and to live in this world. The remedy process is being administered by the Kingdom of Manna and the Manna Trust to all the world's inhabitants will end the global slavery systems while offering new economic systems, not based on enforcement and coercion, but on kindness, on peace, on goodwill, and natural universal law. Can you imagine a system imbued with kindness in place of this unlawful enforcement? Most of us have been transfixed and frozen in lives of survival that we have forgotten simply what it is to be kind, generous, peaceful to ourselves and one another. This is what is meant by a heart and knowledge-based golden age, one we can celebrate in grateful global unity, sending out the message of love, joy and gratitude. This is when true and full disclosure to further historic truths, including our cosmic neighbours, will reveal themselves when we've done the work. We're not the only ones here. The Kingdom of Manna, that was once an advanced civilization 1000 BC, is here once again now. Financial aid and relief has been offered to 209 countries. Currently there are more than 150 that have accepted Kingdom of Manna's offer and are working closely to make this happen for their citizens. The new era of the Kingdom of Manna is just beginning. Kingdom of Manna emerges as a lighthouse from a tumultuous time. Such a tumultuous time in history. And from within a dark storm of corruption, lies, mind-controlling propaganda and human enslavement that we have all assumed for generations as our norm. We've accepted this from the cradle to the grave for all too many generations. And I can honestly tell you that Kingdom of Manna and everything that I have read and seen and am a party to and am privileged and put my hand up and am honoured to be part of with the Kingdom of Manna truly emerges as a lighthouse in this horrible dark storm that we've been in for so much of our history. And people will come to it like a moth to a flame when they start hearing the nature of what is already been offered, currently being offered, and you will want to have your own governments step up and accept what is being offered. Because the Kingdom of Manna sits above all of those governments. Historically, that's what the treaties were all about. That's why the Rothschilds, Vatican, and those kind of control mechanisms were allowed to get away with what they've gotten away with for so long. They had control of the trust accounts. They no longer do. They have not for some 10 years. But it's been the last 2 or 3 years where massive movements and changes have occurred. It's time to shine a light on the true nature of humanity's history and change the world in which we live for the betterment of our children, our children's children, and the right to right the wrongs of our past for all to see and understand, so that they never occur, that they never ever occur again. Anybody sees this occurring again in the future will know. But how do you know what to put your hand up and You know, they get everybody reporting all sorts of illicit, strange things. You know, that's great. Report it to the authorities. But if you don't know what it is that you've been controlled by, how on earth do you report that? So part of the re-education is to make sure everybody knows what's been going on so it never happens again. It's time to educate and participate in the new awareness of a world operating for everybody's benefit. One that recognises the value of all life on earth simply beyond a dollar value. It's time for a world embedded with a natural honouring of life and with the administering of protective mechanisms in place where these forms of historic evils and wrongdoings are not only more easily uncovered, but they're never permitted traction to subjugate humanity again. No matter where we live on earth, it is impossible to deny we live in a pivotal time for humanity and the world itself. It can be argued that we are once again on the precipice of mankind's demise, or I like to think, the edge of a giant leap forward for humankind. The opportunity for the greatest leap forward into the most colourful, amazing, and profoundly advanced future for planet Earth and all of its humanity. All of its inhabitants. All of humanity. And this opportunity lay before us. When you're faced with the facts of what has been happening and what's